What instantly ruins a date for you? Well, I can tell you about my worst date ever. It wasn't even my date. My buddy asked if I could bring him and this girl he's been talking to out on my boat. Sure, I'm going out anyways, so why not? The three of us have a lovely day on the boat, drinking, swimming, relaxing, etc. Well, after the date she tells my friend that she's more interested in me than him, which pissed him off. She tells me this, but then gets pissed when she finds out that I'm married. So she tells my wife that I lead her on, and my wife gets pissed at me. So here I was, being a nice guy and having a nice day on the boat, and afterward everyone is pissed at me, lol. The worst person I dated said let's meet at some restaurant. I was an adult over 25 and this restaurant was not cheap or too fancy, just right for a date. We met there and I had a soda at the bar. I don't know how long he was there before me or remember what he was drinking. And after that meetup, he wants to get out of there and go to some fast food place. Drive-through. I'm like, oh okay. I thought we were going to have a nice normal adult date at a decent restaurant. But sure pal, whatever. He always talked about owning his own business and having a house, and bet you never dated a Leo before. I swear I'm not a gold digger, but this shit. Don't do this. If you can't afford a dinner for two at a mid-priced restaurant, don't suggest going there in the first place. And if you want to be cheap, don't talk all the time about how much money you have and what a great catch you are. An instant date ruiner for me is when the other person is constantly on their phone. It sends the message that they're not really interested in being present or engaging with me. I get that we all have lives and might need to check our phones occasionally, but when it becomes a constant thing, it just feels disrespectful. A date should be about getting to know each other and connecting. And if someone can't put their phone down for a couple of hours, it makes me question how invested they are in the moment. Back in my early 20s I went on a date with a girl. She brought her friend along. Kinda weird, but I guess women have a right to be nervous meeting a stranger. But we were at a public bar/restaurant place, so I'd have to be pretty brazen to do something bad. I tried to ignore it, but she kept talking to her friend every time she asked me a question. It was odd. Like she would talk to her, ask me a question, I would answer, then she would talk to her friend again. Rinse and repeat constantly. Finally I asked why she kept having a sidebar with her friend after every question, and she said, oh, she needs to approve of you first before we can date. I just played it off like it wasn't absolutely insane and continued this weird interrogation style date until I finally had enough and made an excuse to leave. After I got home she texted me that her friend approved of me so far and she'd like to go out again. I told her no thanks, and that shit was fucking bonkers. She tried to play it off like it was in jest or they were just being quirky and fun, but I told her first impressions mean a lot and told her no thanks and I'm not interested. She texted me a few more times trying to play it off and make excuses and that she really was interested in me, but I just blocked the number. Thankfully it ended there. I once went to the restroom to wash my hands after we were seated, and on my walk back as I approached our table I could see she was on a dating app responding to something. Didn't stick around. I turned around, flagged our waitress to give her a small tip. We hadn't ordered anything yet, then walked out. Unmatched her when I got to the car and never heard from her again. So I'd say being 3 minutes into a date and seeing your date on a dating app during a date instantly ruins it for me. Heaven forbid you wait until after a date to explore your options, lol. Shows up to the date already under the influence of something, then offers you a swig from the Mickey in his pocket, tries to discuss expectations for sex and implies that they expect a lot of sex in relationships when you haven't even decided if you want to kiss them yet. Wants to talk about starting a family and some pretty serious relationship stuff, like how they want to have a large family with 6 children ASAP. On the first date. Went on one date with a guy who felt the need to fact-check me throughout the night. He tried to correct me regarding a diagnosed medical condition I have, and when I told him he was wrong he had to look it up. Lo and behold, I was correct. He told me he knew a shortcut to a location I drive regularly and again had to look it up to prove me wrong. I wasn't. This continued until I just stopped saying anything. What a tool. I am married now and I am old for you. Anyone who attempts to neg https://n Wikipedia org/wiki/negging their date don't understand why men, and some women, I am sure, think this shit works. I almost feel bad for them. Emotional manipulation is obviously very dangerous in long-term relationships, but on a first date it's just plain stupid. Neither party is invested yet, so it's easy to spot. Why would anyone want to spend time around someone who isn't fun to be around? Don't get it. Story. I once went to the bathroom and ditched the remainder of the date because the guy was trying to neg me. Multiple unsuccessful neg attempts happened. I should have left the date even earlier. But here are a few highlights. Told me my disability was fake. Made fun of me for not already having other plans that afternoon/evening. I guess only losers make time for dates. Had strange things to say about a dress I knew I looked sexy in, and none of them were compliments. Final straw was his attempt to, I guess, underhandedly tell me I was attractive. All your exes saw you as an object. I know another girl who said someone said almost verbatim the same thing to her and we thought it came from one of those pickup artist handbooks. Bye. Our first date went great, but on the second date, she showed up a little upset and told me her mom called her a bitch. Which was fine, but it was a little awkward because I didn't know her well. After lunch, I suggested we take my car to a nearby park, but she told me how she was worried her car would get broken into, even though we were in a very nice, busy area at noon. Seemed very random to me. On our third date, the parking lot we were supposed to meet at was full, and when I called to ask where she was so I could meet up with her, she made zero effort to help, citing how she didn't know the area. We ended up walking there separately. When I was 18 I went on a date. We sat on a park bench, with a 21-year-old, which just ended up being a proposal for FWB. He psychoanalyzed me, walked ahead of me, didn't even look at me half the time and then would stare at my chest. Then he went on and said virgins like you end up going to college and fucking one guy and then another till they get to 30 bodies and at some point end up getting raped. I'm 22 and still a virgin. A woman bringing her dog. I get the idea, and I get that a lot of women are dependent on their dog for emotional support, but it pretty much just ruins the ability for her to be in the moment. You're sitting there mid-sentence and she's like, some guy SNT, he's so cute. He's so cute. Aren't you so cute? It just never goes well. Like I said, I get it. But it just sets up a condition where any guy who wants a real connection is going to get annoyed and any guy that doesn't get annoyed is tolerating it for one reason. And we all know what that is. Went on a date one time many years ago, from a match on Tinder. Got to the bar. She seems nice enough. We're talking about the bar and stuff. And she's been there many times because she's from there and I'm not. Out of nowhere she tells me she was raped. And the guy who raped her was right over on the other side of the bar. I don't know what to say or do. Like, do I go punch that guy? I sure wanted to, but I didn't know her. For all I know she was some crazy compulsive liar. It was just a weird thing to share. I didn't leave or anything, and I tend to trust unless proven otherwise. I was just really confused. When you're walking down the street and Conan O'Brien sees you from the other side of the street and shouts over, don't tell her about your hentai porn collection on the first date since you look like a weeb. You feel caught but try to play it off and curse New York City for all its attention-seeking whores. In that moment you also walk into a post and hit your forehead while trying to hold a conversation. A friend of mine set me up on a blind date with one of her boyfriend's co-workers. I hate blind dates, so the only way I would agree to it was if my friend, Kate, and her boyfriend, Steve, doubled with us. Turn off number 1. When my date picked me up we had to walk a few blocks to get from my place to his car. He practically ran to his car because he forgot to wear a coat in the middle of winter in Philly, which left me to follow him as fast I could in my heels as I tried not to lose him in the middle of the city. Turn off number 2. When I finally caught up to him at his car he was visibly pissed at me for taking too long and told me I was the slowest walker he'd ever met. Turn off number 3. On the car ride to Steve's apartment, where the date was, we got caught in traffic because of the Philly Street Patty's Day Parade. I tried to start a conversation to pass the time, but he was more interested in screaming obscenities out the window and flipping off other drivers. Turn off number 4. When we finally got to the date location he jumped out of the car and started running again. Luckily I was very familiar with how to get to Steve's place, so I walked at a normal pace, which pissed him off yet again and led to more criticism of my poor walking skills. Turn off number 5. The entire goal of the date was for us to cook a meal together. However, my date decided when we got there that he wasn't in the mood to cook and promptly fell asleep on the couch. Turn off number 6. When Steve realized he was asleep on the couch, Steve went over there to try to wake him. My date played dead like a child who doesn't want to wake up for school. Fake snores and all. It's important to note that despite being pissed as hell at his rudeness, I hadn't said anything to my date yet because the whole thing felt surreal. Steve and Kate kept apologizing for setting me up with this guy. It turns out Steve had only known him for a couple of months because my date was new to the company, and the one time Kate had met him he was very charming. Steve offered to take me home when my date fell asleep. However, I decided to stick it out because I wanted to see how it would end. Turn off number 7. My date conveniently woke up as we were putting dinner on the table. He proceeded to walk over to the food, serve himself several heaping portions, go back over to the couch, and turn on the TV at an ear-splitting volume. We were all flabbergasted. My date had taken over half of the food on the table, leaving barely enough for the rest of us to share. Kate was trying to calm Steve down because he was threatening to physically throw my date out of his apartment. My date acted oblivious to all of this even though it was a small studio apartment. Eventually, Steve calmed down and politely asked my date to leave, which led to turn off number 8. My date was completely shocked when Steve asked him to leave and looked to me for confirmation. When I silently nodded my head, he flew off the handle and started screaming at us for ruining what he thought was a great date. He said I should be thanking him for taking me out because Steve had overstated my beauty. Then he stormed out of the apartment. Needless to say, there was no second date.